It wasn't a murder. It wasn't a robbery. It was a simple letter sent from a county clerk's office that would force the United States Supreme Court to decide, should two men be allowed to say "I do"? What followed was a battle that didn't involve a crime, but a quest for justice, a fight for dignity and love that would alter the course of American history. Imagine a quiet hospital room in Dayton, Ohio, during the sticky heat of summer in 2010. Jim Obergefell, a soft-spoken man in his 30s, sat at the bedside of his dying partner, John Arthur. For more than 2 decades, they'd built a life together, shared laughter, weathered storms, and forged a bond most would call unbreakable. But ALS had stolen John's body, and now time was running out. Their dream was simple: to be married, to have the law recognize what their hearts already knew. But in Ohio, their love was invisible. Jim's trembling voice on the phone, talking to a reporter, said it all. He wanted to be my husband, not a partner, not a significant other, husband. They planned a journey, one final adventure. With John's condition worsening, they arranged a medical flight to Maryland, where same-sex marriage was legal. In a small plane on the tarmac, surrounded by close friends and family, Jim and John exchanged vows as John lay in a stretcher. For a brief moment, the world recognized their love. But when they returned home, the state of Ohio refused to see them as spouses. They were legal strangers in their own home. Then came the letter, the one that broke Jim's heart and ultimately forced the nation to confront its conscience. John passed away, and Jim attempted to have his name listed as John's surviving spouse on the death certificate. The county clerk refused. "No legal marriage equals no spouse," the note read. Jim's diary, scrawled in grief, captured his devastation. "They took John from me twice, first his body, then his name." Jim didn't set out to be a revolutionary. He was motivated by love and loss, not politics. But he couldn't let the injustice stand. He sued the state of Ohio, and his case became Obergefell v. Hodges. The defendant wasn't a villain in the traditional sense. David Hodges, Ohio's health commissioner, simply enforced the law as written. But the law itself, crafted in 1972, was the antagonist. It refused to see Jim and John's humanity. The Supreme Court wasn't searching for a guilty party. It was searching for truth. The evidence was deeply personal: a will naming Jim as John's beneficiary, a marriage certificate from Maryland, the simple, aching desire to be recognized as family. Yet Ohio ignored the will, dismissed the marriage, and hid behind the old law. The arguments against Jim were rooted in fear. Gay marriage is a threat to family values. But the justices saw through it, recognizing that fear was not a fact. A breakthrough came in Justice Anthony Kennedy's draft opinion. Kennedy, who had long been a swing vote on the court, wrote his words while watching his 7-year-old grandson play alongside the child's 2 dads. The sight of innocence and genuine family love shaped his thinking. "The right to marry is fundamental," he would later write. "It's about being seen." The courtroom drama unfolded not with shouts or accusations, but with quiet intensity. The central mystery was not who did it, but will love win? How many couples had been denied the right to marry? Why did states cling to laws that relegated millions to second-class status? Justice Antonin Scalia, in his famous dissent, argued, "The court is not a legislature." He saw the decision as judicial overreach. But for Jim and John, and for millions of others, the court was the moral legislature. It had the power to affirm their existence or to keep them invisible. June 26, 2015, the clock struck 10:20 a.m. The ruling arrived, 5 justices in favor, 4 against. The words rang through the courthouse and across the nation: same-sex marriage is a constitutional right. Jim, standing among a crowd of supporters and reporters, whispered to John's photo, "John, I did it. I said I do for both of us." The impact was immediate and profound. The next day, thousands of couples lined up outside courthouses. In Ohio alone, more than 1,000 weddings took place in 24 hours. The nation wept and cheered and changed. For some, the victory was bittersweet. Their partners had passed away before they could marry. For others, it was the beginning of a new life, the dawn of dignity and legal protection. Not everyone accepted the decision. In Kentucky, County Clerk Kim Davis refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. She was jailed for contempt, not for a crime, but for refusing to grant a right the court had affirmed. Her act became a symbol of resistance in the face of social transformation. But the tide had turned, and the law was now on the side of love. This wasn't a crime story. There was no villain lurking in the shadows, no detective piecing together clues of violence or betrayal. The stakes were emotional, not criminal. Jim's grief became a revolution. The old law, written decades earlier, was exposed as the real antagonist, a relic that had denied humanity to millions. The suspense was never about guilt or innocence, but hope. Would the court's narrow majority hold? Would Justice Kennedy's empathy prevail? Would the nation finally see couples like Jim and John as equals? The emotional peak came when Jim, standing before the courthouse, held John's photo high. They said we weren't real. Today, we're unbreakable. The closure wasn't a conviction, but a transformation. The ruling ended the era of denial, of letters that broke hearts and erased families. Over 1 million weddings have taken place since that day. In every state, love is now seen and celebrated. The crime wasn't committed by individuals, but by laws that refused to recognize the humanity of their citizens. The Supreme Court didn't solve a crime, it ended one. The crime of telling two people they weren't allowed to love each other. The truth that changed America was simple. We do not ask for special treatment, we ask to be seen as human. Jim Obergefell's words echo to this day, reminding us that justice isn't just about laws. It's about dignity, empathy, and the courage to fight for what's right. This is the most important love story in American history. A story where the battle for justice was waged not in back alleys, but in the open, with tears, letters, and a court ruling that reshaped the nation. In the end, the Supreme Court's decision wasn't just about one couple, it was about millions. It built a new America, one where love is finally law. Subscribe to Digital Verdict, True Crime.